This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. On the show today, you'll find out where book publishing is going and how to take advantage of it. How to identify and avoid publishing predators. What opportunities are emerging as the book trade evolves in new forms. How to avoid losing money and much, much more. Join us now as a variety of publishing pros will deliver insights and strategies to take the author to the next level of publishing. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by AuthorU and the Book Shepherd. And now, here's your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Welcome back to another fabulous edition of the AuthorU-Your Guide to Book Publishing podcast. And I'm thrilled to say that we have a return visitor. We loved her so much. We're bringing her back in a short period of time. But before I introduce her, let's just remind you that we share ahas and insights and tips to enhance and support your book publishing journey. My personal goal is always for you to be successful within it and as you continue through it. So just a reminder, if you're on Twitter, make sure you connect with me at My Book Shepherd. And if on Facebook, hey, why not join my book publishing group to share any news you have or ask questions of me or within the community. And of course, you can always email me directly at judith@briles, Briles.com. So here's what I do daily. I post throughout my social media world, which is from Instagram to Facebook to Twitter, LinkedIn. And I always love to share a favorite quote from my book, Snappy, Sassy, Salty Success for Authors and Writers. And today, I'm going to give you something to chew on. Paragraphs aren't meant to run in perpetuity. Think of them as a morsel to chew on. Keep them short for reader ease. Now, I know that runs against the old school that said paragraphs were supposed to have 5 to 7 sentences. One of the things that I learned as a columnist for 10 years, and I'd love to have the input of my guest today on this. One of the things I learned as a columnist for the business journals, there is great power in a one-word sentence. There is a great power in a one-sentence paragraph. Back with us is the fabulous Dorothy Wilhelm. She's a columnist, a humorist, a speaker, and a broadcaster of I can't tell you how many decades. She broadcast her own internet program on the SOB radio network, which, by the way, stands for Spunky Old Broads. So anyone who hosts with her has got to reach the magic age of 50. Dorothy, welcome back.
Oh, Judith, thanks so much. It's so great to be with you. I enjoyed hearing about me. You know, I sound good. And I do want to say, usually I like to ask my guests what their superpower is. Never mind, I know what yours is.
Okay, Dorothy. Okay, and by the way, everyone, today our topic is humor. Interjecting humor within your speaking, within your writing, within your communications. We are all about getting a giggle here, or a smile, or just something that someone just really enjoyed just hearing come across as they read it or their ears. So, Dorothy, what's your superpower?
Oh, no, I was telling you what yours was. Superpower. Yeah, well, you are Wonder Woman. In fact,
Wonder Woman.
If I had realized, I would have sent you. I do meet Wonder Women from time to time, and I like to send them a set of Wonder Woman undies, so that you will be wearing your Wonder Woman undies, and the whole world may not know that you are Wonder Woman, but you will know. So look out for that. Now,
I can hardly wait. With bated breath running to the mailbox.
Absolutely. But you know, from my point of view, I really am funny. And I am one of those people that was able to parlay what I was born with into my superpower. Now, of course, that, like every other superpower, comes with pitfalls and things. I'm a professional humorist, so everything I write is funny. Or it better be. And that's how I've been able to keep my column alive for 30 years. But it's not when you want to inject humor into your serious writing. In many ways, that's harder because people love humor. They cherish it. They thank you for it, but they don't expect it. So you've got to be very careful how you insert it.
Yeah, it also, but here's one of my superpower discoveries and what's essential, especially in speaking, that when you tell a story, speakers are storytellers, when you tell a story, roll out a scenario, a situation, a reveal that is, oh my God, how did this happen? This is horrendous. You've taken your listener or your viewer on a roller coaster. And right now you got them down, you're just, holy shit, what's going on here? You've got to bring them back up. You've got to bring them back up. I have found that humor is the secret sauce to doing that. And there's appropriate times to interject humor, even in some of the most awful situations, to counterbalance, to give people a little relief. Otherwise, my God, the cloud will never leave. That's my experience, Dorothy.
And mine as well. And absolutely, I'd add to this right now a strong, strong, strong caution. Never use a joke that someone has told you. Never use a story someone sent you. You know how people will say, I want to send you this funny story. I know you'd appreciate it. I don't appreciate it. Don't send them to me. There are two reasons. One is, just as you said, the humor needs to come out of that roller coaster story. But also, people will say, well, that was pretty good, but, I read that on the internet last week. You cannot do that.
And I'm going to tell all of you, as someone, and Dorothy and I go back a gazillion years, actually 40 plus years. Dorothy and I go back a long way, and that we were members of the National Speakers Association. And I cannot tell you, I would need all the fingers and toes of a room of at least 100 people, all your fingers and toes, to be able to notch off a joke, a story that someone has duplicated, replicated, ripped off even from other people that's not their own. And that it also entails jokes. Jokes don't usually work. Stay away from them.
Never. And the thing is, it did work. Here's the funny thing, though. You've got to be aware of the times you're presently living in. Because in the 80s, when you and I started, we're old. When you and I started, you could get away with that. I don't know why, but you could. That is, we couldn't, but the old guys could.
The old farts could.
But it's gone now.
Yeah, they did. Some of them, I still hear some of them who have some of the military background sometimes, the old guys, this repetition goes on all the time. And actually insensitivity. I mean, I'm not saying that, you're not going to, as a speaker, and Dorothy and I have been there, you are not going to match with every pair of listening ears in your audience. There are some people who just don't get you, or they just don't connect in some way. Our goal is, we'd love to say, we connect with everybody. And you can't, and you need to realize that. But you do need to be tuned into what could push some major buttons of people. And you're going to get pushback now.
Judith, there's a story that was told back in those old days, though, that was perfect for any writer or speaker to keep in mind, just to piggyback on your comments about the room. The saying was, you can't have everybody in the room, because 10% of the people are going to love you no matter what, because you remind them of their girlfriend or their wife or their mother or their boyfriend. 10% are going to hate you no matter what, because you remind them of their wife or their mother or whoever. It is that middle percentage that you're aiming at that you can get. And don't worry about the rest of them. Also, because if you are speaking in person, body language fools you. I remember one speech that a lady quite close to the front row was literally, she looked as if she was hating the performance so much. I now think she may have had a urinary infection. But anyway, she was tossing herself. She was tossing herself about, holding her arms, up and managed to walk up on her own 2 feet. And she said, "That was wonderful. I enjoyed it so much." And I said, as someone else famous used to say, "Next time, tell your face." Because,
so, Dorothy, let's kiss on this. I know we're about 2 minutes away from our first break to tune into that, but how do you add humor, whether it's to a speech, whether it's to your writing? Let's kind of kiss on both of these, and we'll trail it into the next segment too. But let's kick that off. How do you add humor that doesn't hurt?
Well, you made a really good first step with the telling a story rather than trying to tell a joke. Over the years, I've learned to add, you can add as if you were reflecting on something and as if you had not practiced it in the supermarket several times. Just adding an aside, just like the lady I was telling about. It turns out she may have had another problem going on. But the big thing is you don't try to be funny. You try to see funny. You try to see what's funny in the world around you. When I'm in line at the supermarket, I try to get the whole line going. You can tell if people want to play or don't. Most people are desperate to play. And you start telling them stories, and you can see how people react. You are not, in my opinion, going to be able to insert humor into your writing or your speaking, definitely your writing, without really practicing it to see how it goes over with other people.
Okay, so we're right up to our break, and here's what I'd love to do. If you can, as a writer for many, many years, Dorothy, can you give us many years? Let's give our listeners some tips on how to start interjecting humor.
You bet.
Okay.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these. Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
With me is Dorothy Wilhelm, and we are talking about humor. And I asked her just before we went to the break, because I was saying, how do you add humor that doesn't hurt? Can we play with that in speaking and in writing? But I also asked her, would you come back and let's revisit some of those, tips, steps maybe, of methods of adding humor in that, number one, could, Dorothy, surprise people. That's always fun when it comes in, I think.
Humor is a train wreck. Remember that. It is, of
course. I love
tragedy,
that.
Because, and it's, remember the way you described the scenario. The train's going along, goes through stations, whistle blows, brakeman waves, all that, and then the train wrecks. And that's the story. Humor is that moment when the train wrecks and you tell what happened, but it's to make people laugh. Tragedy plus time is also used, and it's true for more gentle humor. So you've got two things. You've got the train wreck. You've got the tragedy plus time. And then you have to find your own humor personality, which, it'll be very different. Maybe you and I are not that far apart, but many times yours has got to be unique. It's got to be who you are, that people will say, I could hear you talking when I read that book. That's generally thought to be a plus, not always. It's concerning humor. Now, to start with, write. If you are not accustomed to writing humor in your books and articles, this is a little tricky. And Judith, I'll be interested in what you have to say about this. When you are known for expertise on certain subjects, and people are buying your books for those reasons, they want you to be funny, but they don't want you to be too funny, because, this is serious. This is a very hard thing. See, I'm expected to be funny and know nothing. It's much easier. So, to start with, write seriously. Let's just do one of Judith's famous paragraphs. Write seriously without any worry about humor at all, what you want to say. And then go back and look at it and see how you might insert humor into it. Judith, give me a sentence.
After all, just so write seriously. And what was the rest of that? You said write seriously, period. Just period. Write seriously.
And then go back. And you don't think I was listening to me, do you?
Yeah.
Honey, you're not paying enough for that. I'm not,
And then go back. For those of you who are devotees of the Oxford comma, why don't you add one after every word? For those of you who go along with the AP style, maybe just one will be needed. I mean, it's.
But anyway, that's how you make your beginning. And then you do test it on people. Now, I know my children think that I have gone, the way people of my age and place in life often do, because I tell them the same story over and over. But it's the only way to find out what works. And I do tell them in the supermarket. I do tell them everywhere I go. And gradually, you get to where you know what works for you. It's a little different because I write humor columns and humor books. That's both easier and harder. I'm trying to get my agent to move my book out more nationally, and I said, Dave Barry did all of his columns in a book, and she said, honey, you're not Dave Barry. So it's important to know who you are. So that's the first thing, right? Seriously.
Yes, it is important to know who you are on that. And I do an add-on when you're testing it out. Like, it seems like the grocery store line seems to be one of your favorite places. Is that right? Did I hear that right? Okay. So you and I both knew Jeannie Robertson very well.
Oh, yes.
All right. She tested all her material on the first round in front of her church.
Or nursing homes. She would go to assisted living communities and all. But yes, absolutely, her church, yeah.
Yeah, because the people who were there were her primary audience that she reached around the world. So that it was always clean. Jeannie was always clean humor.
Yes,
there was rarely anything that could even be hinted risque when Jeannie spoke. But and she became a superstar. Just a superstar. But she knew who her audience was, and she practiced in front of them, watching for the reaction, the interaction, the heads nodding, the smiles that spread across the face, the nudging, the elbow nudging. That was one of her traits. Did they nudge their partner next to them?
Well, that's really true. But, let's look at some of the humor that Jeannie used. Because she was a master of telling the story, as you were talking about earlier. And I will always remember at one point when my youngest daughter was in her teens, we would listen to her together. And there was one point she was very tall. And she told how she rushed home in tears, something, it was to do with that Miss America contest, rushed home in tears and threw herself across two beds. You see how she was so tall. And so that's what you do. You look at what you're doing and exaggerate it. Now, don't make a point. See, I told a joke. I know a number of people who do that. They feel called upon to point out that they said something funny. No, a humorist doesn't do that. A humorist just goes on bravely and says, I wasn't trying to make you laugh. I was just trying to make a point. Don't say any of that. Just keep going.
Well, I love your point. Don't be afraid to exaggerate. Yeah. Because most humorists take something that is starts very simple, but it grows into proportion. It's like the big fish story. You caught the 6-inch fish, but by the time you're done with this fish, it's 22 feet long. It's
well, and then you run into something that because you were also talking talking about writing humor that doesn't hurt, which is a skill that I really want to get into, because I will say that 97.5% of people who start writing humor have no idea how dangerous humor can be. You've got to really know what you're doing. But first, that story, that rush when people laugh, and that's all very well. You do want to see that, you do want to feel that, but you want to be careful, particularly if you write. See, when you speak, there's a chance, it's quite a good chance, that people won't remember anything you said. You really don't have to worry. But when it's in print, it's there forever. And now it's there on the internet. You were just telling about all the places you take your social media. You can't get rid of something you've written. So you've got to be gentle enough. One thing I really recommend, and this is a hard thing for most people to realize, don't write about your children, because it seems counterintuitive, because your children are funny. And you've got all these wonderful lessons to tell the world that you learned from them, but it's in print forever. My son has always said, I have two sons who are retired commanders, so they keep thinking I'm supposed to do what they say, but no. But anyway, my one son, Commander Steve, says, "Mother, it simply did not happen that way." Well, of course not. I said, "Are they paying you to write a humor column?" No. I can do something like that, but if you tell a story about your child and identify that child, and somebody says something about it, and they will, you may have a rift in the family that can't heal. So you've got to I have had to go back and get written permission, don't laugh, from every one of my children as to what I can write and what I can't write.
So you have to be really careful. Yeah. And the kids will say, "Did I really say?" I didn't say that. I couldn't have said that. On that, I used to, one of my opening stories was, and I may have said it, whether you've heard me say this, but I have said it and shared it. I actually had a pair of underwear fall off at a speaking gig. And when I set that story up, it is really snips of multiple things, and I actually do bring my two daughters into that. They had taken me to lunch, and my younger daughter had what we used to call the stink eye. She could just glare. She could glare, and she is looking me over, and I'm kiss the big 4-0. She is looking me up and down and over, and she finally said, "You have got to do something about your face." That is what she said.
Interestingly, I had a daughter say that to me. Apparently, that's what they say.
Okay. So leading into that, and I end up revealing that the gift that she gave me was a makeup lesson, because my idea was putting lipstick on and I was good for the day. Right. And still, that is still my philosophy in most cases. Maybe some moisturizer, but if I'm on TV, or okay, now we get blush, and now we get some cover, and we get a little. We have to do that for television for sure. Zoom is now forcing, oh my God, I've got to make sure I have eyebrows on, for God's sakes. But she just said, "You have got," and I would say, and I would act it out in front of an audience. Visually, they could see me moving my head up and down, and she did, "Mother, you have got to do something about your face." And I scanned the whole audience, and all these women are saying, oh my God, here we go. All right. So, and the other ones, and my older daughter is just nodding. She's going along with it. And what they gave me was a makeup lesson. So I ended up tying it all in and setting up the story of the great collapse of my underwear on the sidewalks of Seattle. But that what happens is, you've roller coastered them up and down and all that. And we have a great time in this story. The purpose of humor, by the way, when you do a revealing of all of you, is it is a fabulous way to connect with your audience. It's a fabulous way to humble yourself. To expose your vulnerability, that you are just like them. and all those things. And I can't tell you how many people would come up to me later and say, oh, you know what, something like that happened to me.
Absolutely.
Or that happened to my mother, or someone. And I remember when someone saying to me one time, when I was pregnant, how all our clothes expand, but gee, they're in pretty good shape. The material still, is there. So she was wearing her post-maternity underwear and it fell off. I understand that. I totally understand.
And you're exactly for our tip about writing humor. You're exactly right. Here's the thing. You and I both, where our humor comes from ourselves and our life adventure, because it's safe. We can write about ourselves. However, you've got to be really careful. The fine line is what you just said. It must relate to others. They must feel, by golly, I've been through that. I've been there. I know how that is. Not, my heavens, she talks about herself all the time. You see, you've got to have the one and not the other. And as far as humor directed inward is, self-effacing. I hear so many comedians, and of course, we're not comedians, we're humorists. There's a big difference.
Dorothy, I want you to hold that point. We're going to take our next break, and we'll come back on that.
Okay.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Discover the power of you and your book at the Judith Briles Unplugged events. Each summer, Judith Briles Book Marketing Unplugged unfolds over 3 intensive days working with just Judith. You get publishing strategies, author and book platforms, book marketing panache and pizzazz, and authoring tools to take you and your book to rock star success. In the fall and winter, Judith Briles Speaking Unplugged includes Judith as your coach and mentor during 2 powerful days. You will learn how to structure a speech, how to create openings and closings, how to find gigs that pay you and sell your books, and you will get one-on-one coaching. Go to thebookshepherd.com and click on the Events tab to learn how to participate at the next Unplugged Workshop event.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Coming up, you'll hear more about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
With us is Dorothy Wilhelm, and Dorothy, give everyone your website.
Oh, goody. It's nevertoolate.com.
It's nevertoolate.com. And if you didn't pick up Dorothy, a few weeks ago, we did a program dealing with research. And that it was really eye-opening in many, many ways, that a lot of the history that historical societies claim is the gospel, taint the gospel. So on how to really do a deep dive and really find out why there's a tablecloth in a little town and those kind of things. So, okay, I digress. So with that, we're back to you.
Glad you remembered. Go ahead.
Yeah. We're into humor right now and how to really structure it, what you should do, and how to see funny. How to observe funny. And I asked Dorothy, would you give us some steps? And she started off with writing seriously. Don't be afraid to exaggerate, which is absolutely, most humorists will take a very simple thing and all of a sudden it has a new life of all of its own. And that humor can get you into trouble. It can be dangerous sometimes. And Dorothy, you were going to kiss on, I want you to come back to it. Time, when to use family and when not to use family. But you, as we went to the break, you were just starting to talk about comedians.
Yes.
All right, so let's come back and loop that back in.
Well, and I want to, and as we go into it, I want to touch back on what you said about. I listen to you too. Humor for troubled times. So these times we're desperate. Mm-hmm. We are desperate, where we've never been before. Therefore, we need humor more than we've ever needed it before. You should never do anything that doesn't have some humor in it. You know, Abraham Lincoln said, "If I didn't laugh, I would go mad." And I think that that's something to remember. So let's speak about comedians. Comedians, how to put this, are not nice people. Now, I don't mean they're not nice personally, but a comedian makes his money by being mean.
Poking, really poking till it hurts. Yeah.
Don Rickles, of course, was a master of that. But they all do that now. They all do. And I'm sure, they may all be lovely. Some I even know are. But that's what comedians, they're up there to make you laugh at dirty words. Or, as you can tell how old I am, I know there are no dirty words now, but there used to be. And we're not, in my mind, that's not what we're about. Maybe you can do that and have it work. But I will tell you, it will come back to get you, especially if you want to be taken seriously as a writer. This is my belief anyway. I think to be taken seriously as a writer, you have to use humor. So
I don't think meanness ever pays off.
I don't either.
And maybe that is our age, Dorothy. I don't think meanness pays off, and that and you can have a lot of fun and be funny and laugh, and I know that when I do conferences, I often will have a humorist, someone in the humor field, for our evening entertainment at the banquet. And one of the very best people we found was a local guy, Chris. Now he has become very national and going. I tried to get him again. He said, "Oh, I'm already booked." But he was a high school principal, and he came in as the observer of the kids, and he was hilarious, just hilarious, because everybody in the audience had connections in some way, whether they're their own, they're their grandkids, they're their friends' kids, and they have heard some of the outrageous things. He took it to another degree. And I think I almost peed my pants. I laughed so hard at some of the stuff. And I am way beyond my teen years, with kids.
Well, that's such a great example, though, because he could do that. He had a high school full of kids. Now he can talk about them without naming or identifying them. So if you have an office, you have a school, you have something like that, you're in clover, because now you can tell about them without hurting anybody.
But you can also, all of us have that, let me just add that, all of us have that opportunity. It's called opening our eyes and ears. Right. And just pay attention. Let me loop back to Jeannie. Jeannie Robertson always carried a notebook with her, and anytime she sat down, she just got it out and was ready to write. Whatever she saw, odd, unique, weird, it didn't matter if it was two-legged or four-legged, she made notations, and that's where her stories started to evolve from.
That's such a wonderful first step. I'm surprised I didn't think of it myself, is that before they ever start trying to write humor, you can't just sit down and write humor. I'm sorry. Let's be aware of that. You should do a Jeannie thing. You should sit down and start making notes. What's funny and what isn't? What could you do something with? Sometimes you'll see, my kids will say now, because remember, my kids are senior citizens, so it's a little different. But they'll say, we were talking about yesterday, the computer completely broke down, as it will do. And my son said, I don't think you can get a column out of that, though, Mother. And so they think that way. They know. But, to start with.
Yes, you can.
I know that, honey, but I wasn't going to tell him and slow things down. He said, I was relating his thoughts, not mine. Of course you can.
Oh, yeah.
And you're exactly right. But my idea is to piggyback again on Jeannie, is that, by all means, start with that step. Start with writing everything down that you think might work. And now you've got your little phone. If your hands aren't all shaky, you can make little notes in your note thing when you see something.
Yep. Always. Or you can dictate it into your phone. Send notes to yourself. There's stuff that you can do that when Dorothy and I first started writing 4 decades plus ago, that we just had the pencil and the little notebook thing, and
Right.
and the old-fashioned typewriter, people.
And I love the Selectric. There will never be anything like a Selectric. I don't care what anybody says.
Yes, the magic ball as it span around. Yes.
I loved it. I just loved it.
So you could do a column on my love affair with the magic ball.
Well, but okay, you bring up something. This is very important. No, you can't. Now, it's very unusual. Look across the country and you will find almost nobody, because Dave Barry's retired now, nobody who has been writing a humor column for more than 35 years. And the reason is I know what makes a column and what doesn't. A funny little passage that people will read and say, oh, that's nice, that's one thing. And you can get away with that for a while. But if you want longevity, there has to be three things. There has to be the humor. There has to be something they didn't know before. There has to be a fact or something unusual or something that will stay with them. And there has to be a little hope. There has to be a little something that will keep them going.
Always hope. Always some soap. Stay with them. And I just did, so we get off the typewriter thing. I just wanted to share with you, if you're a fan of Tom Hanks, he has a wonderful book called Common Type. It's a series of short stories, and in every story, there is a typewriter, a special typewriter. And Tom Hanks owns over 300 typewriters. He is a collector. And it actually, the book should have been called The Ode to the Typewriter, but it's called Common Type. And I just would highly recommend it to all of you. It's a lovely read.
Nobody knows what ode means anymore, so they would think.
Okay. All right. I'm really dating myself.
And again, see, this is really good. It's like we might think of it taking this show on the road, really, is that to follow up on that. What a beautiful, and that is, it's a wonderful book. And we all love Tom Hanks. That's just one of those things. But ever since Big, you remember Big?
Yeah, I loved it.
Anyway, if you're wanting to start writing humor, I wouldn't do a whole book, but I would do a series of short pieces. Take, like School Days, something that you know well. And in this case, even maybe, your family, just without specific identifications, and write a series of maybe just paragraphs. Remember, a well-written dynamite paragraph can get you just as far or farther than a full column. Although I've got to say, for me, my column is 700 words. No more, no less. Best training in the world. No words are precious. You know how many times writers can't bear to cut their work. They can't bear to throw anything away because it's so precious. No, 700 words, no more, no less.
That's from the old days too. That's what you had. You can't go over that. So just learn how to write. Get into that.
That's what I have right now.
And let me just come back to your point on exaggeration, Dorothy, because you mentioned the movie Big, which was actually one of my favorite ones with Tom Hanks.
That.
Okay, so you're talking about. I'm going to encourage all of you to download that and watch it over this weekend, and that, or find a window, find an hour and a half, 2 hour window, and watch it. But I want you to have your notepads out and pay attention, because if you're talking about the art, from subtleties, from nuances to dipping back, from exaggeration, when he picks up, he's remember, he's a little kid now in this adult body. And he's at this cocktail party, and he sees these little the hors d'oeuvres of the little corn, and he picks it up, and his teeth are going. I know you can see me when I just did that, but he is nibbling along this exaggeration. When he is playing, he finds this keyboard on the floor, and he starts tapping out a tune. That's an exaggeration, humongous. But if you start seeing those things, you then then switch over to something maybe you're thinking writing about, or that. What can you do to manipulate it, to exaggerate it, to drop in the funny bone? That's just, I'm going to give you a homework assignment, everybody. So, all right.
Okay. Oh, I was waiting for the assignment. I was going to say, okay, so number 1 is take that notebook out with us everywhere we go now. Number 2 is watch
Big.
the Tom Hanks. Was that big? Yeah. Watch
Big.
Big.
Yeah.
And start to think of how you can use exaggeration the way they did. How can you use exaggeration to make your point and make people laugh and make them have a wonderful time? And then 3, how can you add that little edge of hope that actually makes it funnier? See, people forget that don't pontificate. Writers have this tendency to either explain their point. See, what I said was funny because, no, actually, it wasn't funny. It's, so you just move briskly on.
Okay. And I'm going to add... I'm going to add number 4. Don't get mean. Don't write.
Don't get mean. Yeah. Absolutely. See, we're pretty good at this, Judith.
Hey, yeah, maybe we are the dog and pony show. It's back to the we're back up at the SOB thing. All right, everybody, we're going to take our final break. With us is Dorothy Wilhelm, and we're really, we're having fun. We know each other, so I love these kind of conversations. It's like I get to catch up with an old girlfriend, and bring it back into play. But these are important tips. So we're back.
Right.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these. Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
All right, so we are playing today, and with me is Dorothy Wilhelm, and that we are really looking at is humor, the inside, the ins and outs, ups and downs, and over and under, bringing humor to your writing. And since I know the number one way to sell books is through personal appearances and speaking, that when you can incorporate and weave humor throughout your dialogue, your interaction, you will become a magnet, and people will want to be around you. They will want to hear what you have to say. They'll want to come and play with you. And guess what? They buy your book if you have a book, because they're going to take you home. So that's kind of my little 2 bits as we lead into our final segment here.
Yeah, I love humor. I love the feeling that people come to depend on you when after the very first the school shooting in Oregon. This is on all of our minds. How can you possibly find any humor? You've got to be careful. You can't write about what's happened. You must nod to it. You must tell a story or something to put people in the setting that you know what's going on. But it's too fresh and too painful to make humor about it. So what you do is you work around it. But if you are a humorist and people look to you for humor, you have got to find it. Lady wrote to me after the school shooting, and I had been so moved by it that I had written about a ribbon my daughter sent me from the fence at the Oregon school. She went to school out there. And the lady said, I read your column every month because you're funny. Well, I read it this month and you weren't funny. And I knew I had disappointed. They come to expect that in these times, you'll find a way to lift them up. That's quite a burden, but it's a wonderful thing.
It is, but let me also add on. Some of my listeners know that I used to be the speaking coach for Miss America for 8 years.
Yes.
And working with her, and one of the Miss America from Florida, her platform involved AIDS, and this was during the time that everyone thought, the belief, the general consensus was that AIDS was only a men's disease,
Right.
that it only happened to gay men, period. It was a very black and white belief during the time. And so she's out trying to talk to people about AIDS in that environment. And there was nothing funny about it. There was nothing humor. And it was like, oh my God, Cornette's coming in. Oh my God, it's going to be a bummer. And I said, we restructured her presentations. And I said, you need to tell stories about these men. Tell us something funny what they did. Tell us, make them human instead of always the tragedy. They've got it, they're going to die. And it totally morphed her reception that people had toward her as well as for herself. It was a very important thing to what was going on, but there wasn't the connecting. And now she turned them in, these men, it was men she was always talking about, into human beings with, that had families and did outrageous things and did all that. And it was totally different. Totally different.
And the fact that then when you're telling about the people involved, see, that's a master stroke that everyone should remember. When you're telling about the people involved, you can then use humor. It can be something they said, not something you said. Nobody cares what you think, really. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Charlie. But there was a couple of things we wanted to get into. Was how to use how to use exaggeration. And I'm thinking, as I was listening to you, I was watching the gentleman go by outside with a leaf blower, which they do for the condo. I can't tell particularly why, because he's never seeming to get anywhere. Now, that would be a basic sentence about that you might use to build on humor. And then we would incorporate what I like to call the rule of three, which means one thing is funny, two things are not funny, by the way, never use two. Three things are funny. So I'm watching this guy, and I will tell you that he's not from around here. And he's going by with the leaf blower, and I'm a little bit worried because so far he's blown away 4 spiders, 3 squirrels, and a half can of Olympia beer. I don't know what will be next.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, I'm with you.
Yeah. And so that's an easy way. Those are not what we call belly laughs. No. But if you're getting started, don't, and that's the thing I say, don't worry too much. These are easy ways to get your feet wet without hurting anybody, without going too far wrong. And you will very quickly work out what works for you and what doesn't work. But if you do something like that, you've got something that is at least smileable. If smileable, maybe, to start with, that might do it. You will, again, very quickly, what you must do is not what we talked about the old age speech is true. And again, be kind and aware of the people that you're working with and that you love. I knew about Bill Cosby way before anybody else did because of the wretched things that he said about his children under the guise of funny. And then knowing my own children who were that age, what it would have done to them to hear those things. There was his piece about putting a condom on a banana, very funny, unless you are a 14-year-old boy and your dad's saying that. But see, often comedians are estranged from their families, and often that's why. So remember, be kind. That's the most important thing you have to do. Just add that little touch.
Yeah, a lot of people, Dorothy, don't realize that a lot of times comedians come from very ugly childhoods. And it just, and I suspect humor became their escapism. And they evolved that. But sometimes you hear that meanness. I've been around it many, many times. And I know in the old days, because I used to love to go to humor. I used to love to go to comedy shows,
Right.
And those kind of things. But I learned not to sit in the first 3 rows.
Yeah. And that was always true. My dad shared that when he was a young man in Texas, he was a cowboy, he loved to go to burlesque shows. Now, this is, that was the way it was. And that he quickly found that if you sat in the very front row, the spotlight was turned on you. So you got to be aware that can happen.
Oh, yes. I remember one time the children's father took me to hear Red Fox. I didn't know who Red Fox was, but it was, it was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can take this. It was.
It's kind of a wind-up thing, though. I want to really tell people that there is the biggest opportunity for humor now. I think I find people, I just hear so much from people who say, how much they appreciate the smile, the laughter, the fact that it's not mean, the fact I know tons of people. I have one lady that always calls up her son and reads it to him. I know he appreciates it. It's such a needed skill at this time that if you can only even just start putting a little lightness into what you're writing, it will, I think, pay off for you. And we all are in favor of payoffs. You know that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to reiterate for all of you the power of 3. When you learn, there's a rhythm to it.
Yes.
There's really quite a rhythm to it. And people, it's like the punch. Okay, here's the punch. It's coming through on that. And the greatest speakers out there have reiterate that. They use it throughout their presentations whether it's an opening, whether it's a closing, whether it's a key point they're working on. They have learned the power of 3 to remember, to emphasize, to do so many things. Even politicians have gotten the hang of it, but sometimes maybe not to our goodness, but but people stick to it. They remember it, and there's a very psychology to it. So do understand it, practice it, and get into that rhythm, because it will make you far more successful as a presenter. It'll certainly make you present it, as the punchline, then you're starting when Dorothy was telling her story about the half can of beer left over. Then you're wondering, so why didn't he drink it? What was wrong with it? Why did he leave it?
Because they're not paying him to drink it. So anyway, I think, have fun with it. Oh, and that's another thing, just as Judith and I are kind of doing, that is back and forth with a friend. Try different angles, say different things. You'll be amazed. Again, I keep saying it, it's really true. Just work at it a little, and you'll be able to tell what works. Because Judith and I, given another, I'd say 27 minutes, maybe 23 possibly, we really would have a whole show worked up. I mean, we could take it on the road, because we both know how to work with humor. Once you have that skill, it's invaluable.
Well, and the reality is sometimes the best humor is spontaneous.
Yes.
It's spontaneous, and it just happens. It just comes with it. And that. So with that said, Dorothy, thank you for being with me again for another fabulous hour.
Always wonderful fun. If we ever get it within the same 100 miles of each other, we must have lunch.
At least. All right. All of you, thank you for sharing your time with me today on AuthorU-Your Guide to Book Publishing. Please go to the show page at bit.ly/book publishing podcast and select from over 550 podcast episodes for your learning, listening, and book success.
Thank you for being a part of Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles.